Bishop Charles Ellis, welcome back to American Black Journal.
Thank you, Elena, for having me.
We are certainly excited to have you back on. Listen, Bishop Ellis, I want to talk to you about your leadership role in the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World Fellowship, where you served as presiding bishop for 8 years, and you actually still serve on the board of bishops. Just tell us how a Bishop Charles Ellis from the city of Detroit works his way up to becoming presiding bishop of one of the largest Pentecostal fellowships in the world.
Well, I thank God for being a church baby, a pew baby, we call them. You know, I was born in the church, and that's all I've known all my life. And I'm blessed to be a third generation Pentecostal pastor as well as preacher, my grandfather, my father, and myself. And we've probably been a part of the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World probably from the late 30s. My father was born in 1935. My grandfather founded a church that is still in existence in Chicago on 35th and Indiana Avenue on the south side of Chicago. And he founded that church in 1934. I believe a few years afterwards, maybe 5 years afterwards, I believe, he affiliated with the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World. So we've been in this organization for a long time. My father rose to the position of assistant presiding bishop. He was probably going to become the presiding bishop in 1998, but he made his transition in 1996. Now, my journey, I've been with the youth group of the PAW, 1982, assistant treasurer, then treasurer 88, 82, then treasurer 88, then president of the youth auxiliary in 92, and then became an assistant treasurer of the parent body, sitting with the board of bishops in 1996. So my journey has, Bishop 99 at Cobo Hall. The convention was here in Detroit that year. I was the only bishop, and actually the last bishop, Orlando, of the 1900s. I was the only bishop in 1999. So I kind of found myself in 2004 when I became assistant presiding bishop, and then presiding bishop in 2010. Many individuals told me that I was that bridge from the younger generation to the older generation because I made presiding bishop at 52 years old. Now, my dad died at 60, he would have been 61 that year. 2 years later, he would have become presiding bishop at 63. I became presiding bishop at 52 and was finished with 2 4-year terms in 2018 at the age of 60. So yeah, it's been an incredible journey. The grace of God, a lot of favor. I believe that the seasoned generation were not afraid of me. They knew that I had been raised in this organization. They knew that I knew how to respect leadership and not come in knowing it all and with a cocky attitude or prideful attitude. And I think that my journey has been a great deal of my father's training and the relationship that I've had with that seasoned generation.
That's really awesome. I want to talk a little bit about your father, because what you're describing is legacy in the fellowship that you grew up in, but also under the tutelage of your father, the late Bishop David Ellis. Talk about his legacy and influence as you work your way up the ranks through the PAW.
Well, my dad was an organizational man. He made bishop in 1982, assigned over the Diocese of Georgia. Here in the United States of America. And I thank God for his journey in the organization. And he was an organizational man, no ifs, ands, buts about it. But I think that Detroit really appreciated that Bishop David Lee Ellis, while he was apostolic in his doctrine and in his teachings, he was absolutely ecumenical and interfaith in his love and in his collegiality with the other religious figures here in the city of Detroit metropolitan area, and even broader than that. So I've learned from that and have learned to take what God has given me in my teachings and my understanding of the Bible, but not to think that we have it all, to find a way to work with others, to appreciate others where they are. At the end of the day, there's one heaven, there's one God. And I don't have a problem with anybody that's going to be there. I'm just hoping that I'm there and believing that I'm going to be there. And whoever else the Lord decides to allow in, that's fine with me.
Yeah, I love it. I think of the relationship between you and your father, and just that story overall as a King David and Solomon relationship. I mean, it really has been magical to watch from afar, and to know about his ascent and to see your ascent in my lifetime has been such a privilege to watch and to learn from. I want to ask you about something else that you mentioned. You mentioned, serving as a bridge between generations. And, during this series, we've been asking this question around engagement on part of older folks, but specifically on part of the younger folks, the millennial generation and Generation Z. Where do you stand in 2021 with remaining and building those bridges to keep young folks engaged in the Black church in Detroit?
Well, I think that as I grow and mature and the more seasoned I get, I choose my words very carefully now. See, you all can get away with the older folk and the younger folk. See, it's no problem with the younger folk, but when you start calling people like me now older folk, once I hit that 60, man, I'm not sure I saw it coming, because I feel like I felt when I was 40. I get up, whatever I want to do. I'm not on any meds or anything. I play golf all the time and I just enjoy life, So now when people say, you're older, I'm like, okay. And listen, Orlando, I wrote the grant that built Elliss Manor, our senior citizen complex right next door on the same property in the campus here. And I will tell you, I didn't build that place for me. I built it for old people to be able to live their lives out in dignity and quality. And now that I'm 62 plus 1 year, 62 is an age to get in there. You have to be independent in your living. I meet those two qualifications. Now I make too much money because that's a low income senior facility and affordable living. But, I didn't build that place for me. I couldn't even see myself filling out an application over there, but I could, and so
I called you a bridge, Bishop. I did call you old. I called you a bridge.
Listen, I use the word season at Greater Grace Temple. I'm going to be celebrating probably right at about 15 individuals over 90. And I call them our seasoned, not seniors, I call them our seasoned members. But I will tell you that I would hope that I have been that person to be the bridge. I believe that more bishops were elected under my 8-year administration than any other time in this organization. I think at last count, something like 39 bishops, many of them younger individuals. I will definitely say 4 of them women, and there have never been female bishops in this organization. So I will say to you that I would hope that I have been looked upon as a bridge builder and one that could not just celebrate and lean toward that group or that group, but one who could appreciate everybody. And I hope that I will still, at 63, be at that age where I can appreciate all of the value that our youth bring to the church, as well as not discard the wisdom of that seasoned community that still exists in our church.
I love it. Bishop Ellis, for decades now, Detroit has been an epicenter of Black culture and Black faith. Can you talk a little bit about Detroit being America's largest majority Black city and the outsized influence that it has on predominantly African-American denominations, not only in the city, but in the country and around the world?
Whenever you talk about civil rights movement, Detroit comes up. You have Dr. King with Reverend C.L. Franklin and other religious leaders here leading that march down Woodward. We have his speech at Cobo Hall, the I Have a Dream configuration of the speech. And all of us know that as pastors, we preach messages and we bring a little bit from that to this, to this, to that. So there was a little bit of the I Have a Dream speech in that speech in 1963 at the march down Woodward, and that ended up at a rally there at Cobo Hall. But people don't realize that, when you talk about Detroit, you have a lot of religious leaders here who have risen to that plateau and that elevation of the highest office in many of the major mainstream African-American religious organizations. You talked about myself being the presiding bishop of the Pentecostal Assemblies of the World, which is the oldest apostolic organization in the modern world. We trace our roots right back, not just to Azusa Street, in California there, but all the way back to the day of Pentecost in the upper room. But even you have the Progressive Baptists, and Dr. Charles Adams served as the president there. James Perkins celebrated the leadership of that presidency. You have Bishop J. Drew Sheard now, who is now the presiding bishop of the grand old Church of God in Christ. You know, yes, we've had Bishop C.L. Anderson Jr., who served as the first presiding bishop or the second presiding bishop at one time, and Bishop P.A. Brooks, God bless both their dust, you know, who celebrated the leadership of the first assistant presiding bishop. But now we have a presiding bishop of the Church of God in Christ right here in Detroit, Michigan. You know, my good friend, Bishop Lambert Gates, who celebrates now as the pastor here in Detroit of Apostolic Faith Temple, as well as Mount Zion in Indianapolis. But he was Detroit bred, born, and his roots trace back to Clinton Street, Greater Bethlehem Temple, right there on right there, the Linwood, Chicago Boulevard area. And, you know, he is the presiding bishop of an offshoot from us in 1957, I believe, the Pentecostal churches of the Apostolic Faith. So listen, we have great influence even in the mainstream, large Black religious institutions.
I love it. My last question for you, Bishop Ellis, is for you to tell me what you think tomorrow holds for faith in the Black church in the city of Detroit. You know, we talk a lot about the various denominations and the fantastic leadership that has arisen. What about tomorrow? What happens tomorrow? What happens with the young folks that are coming up now through the ranks? Does Detroit remain an epicenter and a breeding ground for these religious leaders to continue to soar to the top of these international denominations and fellowships?
Well, let's say that, you know, there's still a place for the organized body of religious institutions and beliefs, the denominations and the reformations and organizations. But I think that we cannot discount the great influence of the independent churches in this day and in this season. And we've seen that here in Detroit. We've seen offshoots of the Keith Butlers and the Word of Faiths and those independent churches, you know, that have launched from denominations. Reverend Pastor Keith Butler, Bishop Keith Butler, you know, was Church of God in Christ, you know, and his roots are embedded there. But he launched out to have an independent church and rose to be a great influential body within the religious community. So I think that we see a lot of that now. While there's still a place for organized denominations and organizations, I think that we cannot discount the independent churches who find their own niche, who find their own place to minister to those individuals that pretty much would not see themselves conforming to that of an organization and denomination. So you have now, you have substance abuse ministries, and you have all different kinds of not cookie cutter, but specific and individualized and specialized ministries that serve to a great extent a good demographic of individuals that need that specific ministry. They're not looking for maybe a choir with robes. They're not looking for a preacher that has a clergy collar or a black suit or a cross in his pocket. They're looking for that person that they can identify with. Some of them call them street preachers, or some of them call them raw preachers. You know, they need somebody, you know, to give them not the Melchizedek and the Isaiah and the Ezekiels and all of that. They need somebody to tell them, you know, how to make sure that Pookie doesn't cause you to lose your soul, you know. And so I have become, Orlando, I've become one who has embraced what God has given an individual to minister in their way to that individual sitting in front of them, whether it be virtually or whether it be right there in person. And listen, I'm not saying everybody has to be a Greater Grace. I'm not saying that everybody has to be a National Baptist or a Presbyterian or AME or none of that. You know, at this point in time, God is bigger than all of us. So I have that great appreciation even for those ministries as well.
an amazing button to put on this conversation. Bishop Charles Ellis of Greater Grace Temple, thank you so much for joining us on American Black Journal.
Thank you for having me. Be safe out there.